Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining today's Hangout to go over how to administer the beginning of year Ithaca City School District Kindergarten Math Assessment. I'm sorry I had some technical difficulties. I'm starting about 5 minutes late. My apologies. So thanks for joining. All of the materials have been sent to your school. So as you're starting out, it's important to have the teacher pages or the teacher materials. And it's also helpful to have the rubric, the scoring rubric that's going to help you score each of the items then on the bubble sheets for the students. All right, so the purpose of this assessment is really just to collect some beginning of year information about how the students are doing and what they're thinking as far as early mathematics. And it's also to collect baseline information for the beginning of the year annual professional performance review. So it's the student learning outcome growth score. All right, so there are really just 3 tasks, and each of those tasks, there's a task A that you'll see in the administration guidelines is simply rote counting. And right on our rubric, that's right here too. So that's task A, rote counting, and then how you score the different elements of that. All right. So for rote counting, it's administered one-to-one. As you know, you really just sit down with the student and you just want to know how far they can count and whether they have that number sequence down. So you just start out by saying the following, and what's great about these directions is everything you have to say out loud is bolded. So you just say, I want to hear how high you can count. Start counting at 1 and count as high as you can. And then students go ahead and count. You can record that right there on the bubble sheet, what the student does. Now, if the student does make an error before making it to 10, that first time that he or she does that, you can stop him or her and say, oh, let's try that again from 1. And the student will have another option or another opportunity then to count to 10 and beyond to see how far they can count. If he or she can't make it to 10 again, we don't stop again. You can record how high the student counts up. And you can, then we score it right here. Okay, so then there are some options. A 0 for the first one. So you see how for each task there are a couple of items that we score because we're trying to get some more refined information. So if they count 1 to 9, if they count 1 to 19, or they count 20 plus, and we're not even including errors in that. So at least they're trying to get beyond, you know, the teen numbers or beyond 20. So it doesn't matter if they get errors here. And then that second box is really talking more about accuracy. So we're talking about knowing some of those numbers, just trying to get that sequence kind of down. And this one really has to do with errors. All right, so that first item again is simply if they're attempting to count higher. And that second item in that task A, in that first task, is really about thinking through errors in the sequencing. And that's simply so that teachers can target their teaching, so that you all can say, oh gosh, you know, this kiddo is really working hard to try to get beyond 20, but has some, you know, it's sort of getting mixed up in those teen numbers. And so we can break things down more specifically like that. At the beginning, I did forget to tell you there is a question and answer panel over on the side. So if you do have any questions, they'll just pop up for me and I can answer them directly. So if you have any questions throughout, just go ahead and click on that Q&A and you can type them in and I'll answer them. So that's task A. Task B also has 2 items, and this is really around one-to-one correspondence. You can use any kind of cube, any kind of cube. They can be unifix cubes, they can be centimeter cubes, they can be multicolored or single colored. Some teachers find it's easier if they're single color because then there's less distractibility around creating patterns. So but that's really up to you. Again, this is administered one-to-one, and the purpose is just to determine how the child counts the groups of objects with that focus on one-to-one correspondence and naming each object as we're counting it, right? Like 1, 2, 3, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So we just line up 20 cubes for the student to count with a little bit of space between them. And we just say, count to see how many cubes are in the line. And then you just record the student's method of counting. Again, we're on task 2 here. We can note if there's some skips, etc. And then we score that right here on the rubric. So we're in task B, so it's this grayer one right here. And item 3 is we're scoring really how many cubes they're able to count. And then in item 4, we're really talking about touching them or not touching them. All right, seeing about that one-to-one correspondence. All right. And again, that just helps us get really specific with the teaching and find out whether we need to really focus in on one-to-one correspondence or if we need to move on to having them count higher numbers of objects. All right. So that's task B. Moving on to task C. It's just simple addition with manipulatives. So the things that will come with that are the addition cards that are right here. So if you just cut those out beforehand, that'll be helpful. And students should have access to cubes and paper and pencil. We find most kids don't really use the paper and pencil, but they may use their fingers. They may use a combination of their fingers and the cubes. They may use just the cubes, and sometimes they just know them in their heads. I'm sure you'll find all sorts of combinations of those things as well. So we place the cubes and the paper and the pencil just near the child. Okay. I'm going to give you some addition problems to solve. You can use any of these things to help you. And you just sort of point to the materials that are there. You display the 3 + 1 equation card, or expression card, I should say. And you just say, show me how you figure out 3 + 1. And we don't really prompt the child to solve the problem, so if kids just are confused, that's totally okay. It's totally okay. A lot of students come in and they don't really have a strong concept of addition, and that's completely normal. Again, for each of the problems, so we have 3 + 1, 2 + 3, and 4 + 2. And for each of those, we're really just trying to look at 2 things. So items 5 and 6 are the 3 + 1 problem. And we're looking at the student solved the problem accurately or inaccurately, and then whether he or she showed his work or didn't. So if a student is solving 3 + 1 and they get it accurately, but they can't tell you how they solved it, then that's going to, well, they got it accurately, but they couldn't show work, or they didn't understand, or maybe it was some sort of fluke. If a student does say, I just knew it, or I just figured it out in my head, that's totally acceptable, and that's a way, so it says shows work fluent okay. So if the child is totally fluent and has got it down, it's all good. He or she does not need to say, well, I counted 3 out on my fingers and then added 1 more and then I counted them all up. Ultimately, we want to move them toward fluency, so we don't want to give them lower scores simply because they know it automatically, right? So then we go through each of them. We continue to say, show me how you figured out 2 + 3, and then show me how you figured out 4 + 2. And again, we're looking at if they're solving it accurately or inaccurately for each of those, and then whether they're able to show their work or not. And again, fluency is totally okay. So you're going to record each of these things just on the answer sheets that, again, came to your schools. If you need more copies of materials, I would suggest just making copies right there. I'm sorry, I just saw a comment that said 3 + 1 = 4, I hope. Yes, you're totally right. Did I say 5? Did I say something totally off? I might have. My apologies. Yes, 3 + 1 = 4. Absolutely. Yes. So if you do need more copies of materials or anything, they should be right there in the school. If for some reason they didn't arrive for any reason, please feel free to just email me and I can get those to you. It's pretty straightforward. Again, we're just asking them to engage in some rote counting, some one-to-one correspondence, and some simple addition just to get those beginning of year skills. We don't have the last task like we had last year, so it's much more straightforward as it has been in the past. So if you do have any questions and any part of this was confusing or you need clarification, please just email me. And if it's something that I need to send out to the whole group, I'll send it out to the whole group and we should be all good. Thank you so much for taking the time to administer this beginning of year assessment. Thank you so much for participating in the calibration training. And good luck and enjoy it. All right. Thanks, everybody.